You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 9th of October 2025 on Monocle Radio.
Another ceasefire in Gaza, is this the one that holds? Another Prime Minister in France, ditto. And a bargain opportunity for Americans to wait out the Trump years in rural England. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Yossi Meckelberg and Mari Leconte will discuss the day's big stories, and our weekly letter is from Georgia, not the US state, the other one. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller and I am joined today by Yossi Meckelberg, Associate Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House, and Mari Leconte, the political journalist and author. Hello to you both.
Hi.
Yossi, it probably does seem to you, and indeed to many of our listeners, like you have done little else with your week than sit here in this studio talking people through the Middle East, but we will come to that again shortly. You're not off the hook yet, but what else have you managed to find time to do?
So I mentioned to you earlier that I went to see a play called Punch, which again is not light entertainment, unfortunately. It's about actually the phenomena. It's based on a true story of the phenomenon of one punch that actually can kill people. There is the case, it happened in Nottingham, of a guy that just got involved, punched someone that he never met before, and as a result of the fall, the guy was killed. And the one that punched Jacob went to jail for 14 months only for doing that, but reflected on the time there and reconciled with the family of the victim, and him and the mother of the victim joined effort together actually to talk to students, school pupils, all about the danger of this. So it's a very powerful play.
So eventually uplifting, but it kind of makes you work for it?
On two things that actually, as you would expect me, are connected to the Middle East.
Here we go.
Is the idea actually that people can actually reflect of what they do and look for forgiveness and the needs for truth and reconciliation between people, how important it is.
Well, we will return to the Middle East and the faint spectre at this point of such possibilities. But before we do that, Mari, you have, as I understand it, been reinventing yourself as an eccentric billionaire art dealer.
So that is the hope in the medium term. In the next 5 to 10 months, hopefully I can become a billionaire.
You've ticked off eccentric and art dealer, though, already, right?
Exactly.
So
yeah. How dare you, eccentric? I'm the most normal person who's ever lived.
One more to go.
But yes, now I've happily launched the Outsiders Arts Club in London, which is a new quarterly night where people can buy an affordable ticket and essentially get a slice of the art world. Because I think the art world is so often just quite intimidating, unwelcoming, and also, let's be honest, a playground for very rich people. So this is actually fun, accessible night. So you kind of turn up. There's going to be a talk by a curator who will explain what curators actually do. And honestly, that's partially for me as well. I'm not really sure what curators do. And they'll be able to have a glass of wine and then, crucially, buy some art by kind of up-and-coming artists who don't quite have formal gallery representation yet. And all of it between £200 and £450. So kind of helping out artists who are starting out, but also getting cool original pieces for people for their homes. And then hopefully everyone's happy, and maybe again I make my first billion at some point soon, and any time now.
If any listeners are enticed by this proposition, and I for one cannot imagine why they would not be, how do they find out more about it, was the sentence I was struggling to assemble.
It was there somewhere.
It was there. All the right words, just in the wrong order, etc.
We've all been there. Incredibly, we had 100 tickets up for sale. We sold all of them in 24 hours, within 24 hours of putting the link online, which was quite incredible. We will be having a second edition in February. So sign up to outsidersartsclub.com. There are details on our social media, our newsletter, etc. Come join the out crowd.
Well, we will start in Gaza and with what may be the beginning of the end of 2 years of war. Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a deal which will include a ceasefire and the exchange of the 20 living Israeli hostages held by Hamas since October 7th, 2023 for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Israeli troops in Gaza will also withdraw from some of the positions they hold, and aid will be permitted into Gaza, 400 trucks a day initially, more if the peace stands up. What is not clear yet, even assuming good faith on all sides, is what Gaza's next couple of years will look like. Yossi, first of all, I think, at the risk of tempting fate, we can say this is good news, but how good is it?
It is good news. Again, we said here for so many times, ending the war is the most important thing. Because you can move then into improving the situation. But first, people are not killed. Getting also the mentality of the only way to move forward is using force. So we can start moving. If the war ends, the bombing stops, release of the hostages, exchange of prisoners, more humanitarian aid, limited withdrawal, not a full withdrawal. Then they need to go back to the negotiation table and start working on the rest of the details. So if you have 20 points in the so-called Trump plan, which is not really a plan, it's more a list of aspirations and principle, then you can bring some details into that. Because at the end of the day, we'll have to end with full withdrawal, new governance in Gaza, the reconstruction of Gaza, security regimes in Gaza, and then also to think what's going to happen with the West Bank. And as you go down the list of points, you see maybe a Palestinian state, but it shouldn't stay the case. But going to all the root causes. So it's just the first step. But I think if the next 72 hours we'll see the end of the bombing, the end of the war, and the release of the hostages, and see prisoners released, more humanitarian aid, then we can look at working on the rest.
Well, Murray, in the next 72 hours, as things stand, US President Donald Trump is due to fly to Jerusalem, which does suggest that he's reasonably confident, at least.
Yes, and I think it's a very odd situation. I was talking about it with an American journalist earlier today, whose argument was essentially that, and even it's not someone who likes Trump by any kind of means, but saying that Trump at this stage was probably the only president who would have been able to do this, because I think he is so unpredictable and he's so brash that actually every side here clearly had this sense of presumably, actually we probably have to agree to this and do this now because he may change his mind in 2 weeks and that may be incredibly bad news for us and we have no idea, again, of seeing that coming. So I guess we have to agree. So sort of resentfully, but I guess, good news is good news. I think that this is a big win for Donald Trump.
Good news is good news, Yossi, and credit where due, etc. But a lot of this peace plan is not massively different from what President Joe Biden was pitching around last May. So why do we think Benjamin Netanyahu has agreed to this now? Is it, as Mari says, that he just thought, if I don't agree to this now, then who knows what happens next? Or does he feel like he's made his point?
I think there is the element of Trump here that plays a very important role. Because what happens, and I think we're getting used to this, Trump creates his own reality. And then he asks us to follow, basically, or demands us to follow his own reality. When it works, it's fine. When sometimes it's such a bizarre reality, which is less welcome. In this case, he realized, but it was a combination of things. Biden was not ready to put pressure on Israel. There was no doubt about it. And there were opportunities to reach a very similar deal before. But there was other things. There is fatigue within the Israeli military. We know that the head of the IDF was against entering into Gaza City. The bombing of Doha, which is a lack of judgment, the highest scale, that really upset Washington. You attack a mediator and the negotiators in a country which is ally of the United States.
And this is where we end up with that bizarre tableau of Netanyahu being made to read an apology.
Yeah, which is, for him is a humiliation. He had to apologize outright, but he justified. Originally said, we'll find Hamas people everywhere. We don't care which country they are. We'll continue to do that. So there was accumulation. At the same time, Israel is more isolated internationally, the recognition of Palestinian state. Spain suspending weapons supply, Germany. So there is some accumulated effect with the pressure within Israel. So there is always in wars, there is this point, a turning point. But I think, again, I agree with me, the Trump factor is crucial.
Murray, how sorry in advance do we feel for whoever is going to be told tomorrow that they've won the Nobel Prize for Peace, assuming it's probably not President Trump?
Oh, that's going to be, someone probably has to collect the award and then leg it somewhere without internet, I think.
That is going to be a weird moment. But just before we move off this, I do want to talk about the future of Gaza. And one of the things, Murray, that has been floated is the idea of some sort of governance structure, perhaps chaired by Sir Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of this country. For all that he does prompt a certain amount of reflexive eye-rolling for obvious enough reasons, is it actually necessarily a terrible idea?
Yes. I don't know. I think I personally find it quite hard not to be cynical when, anything matters, anything related to Tony Blair. Because the problem is actually, I think his record since, leaving Downing Street in Britain has just not been stellar. He has worked with a number of regimes, who have not been great, it's fair to say. So I think the idea, again, of having someone who does not have deep roots in either Israel or Palestine to kind of get in and try to sort something out is not an inherently bad one, I think. It's just Tony Blair specifically, I'm not convinced at all is the right person for this. But yeah, there's no amount of money, however, you could offer me to suggest someone, because that is a job that I think would be quite tough. Oh, are you nominating yourself?
And that's one of the issues, who you appoint. Again, you always look in this situation of the kind of positive and negatives, and we know Iraq and the quartet and all what you mentioned. But at the same time, he has opened door to Trump. And I think some of the positive changes in the plan are thanks to Tony Blair. He has opened door in the Gulf, and they might support more any reconstruction plan in Gaza. He was one of the key players, or the key player in the peace process in Northern Ireland. So there's something actually go for him in this. I don't want to say is what is an interim become permanent. So we'll see a British High Commissioner for the next 10 years reviving the British mandate on Palestine. So that's definitely shouldn't happen.
Well, ask a Bosnian how long these temporary arrangements can last. But on the subject of impossible jobs, to France, a nation currently not straying too far from their phones, lest they get a call asking them to form a government. Or, now that I read that back, a nation which has perhaps flung their phones into the nearest available river for exactly the same reason. The Élysée Palace said yesterday that President Emmanuel Macron would name a new Prime Minister within 48 hours, which means that circa this time tomorrow latest, some other poor sap will have been issued the whip and chair and sent into the National Assembly. On the right of the chamber, the National Rally are vowing to vote down any new government, while on the left, France Unbowed are demanding the resignation of Macron himself. Murray, I believe you are constitutionally eligible to be Prime Minister of France.
Only if they catch me.
Well, at the current rate of knots, your number's going to come up. But seriously, why would anybody want this job?
Oh, goody. I don't know, but you know what, actually, in a weird way, I think actually if you're not part of Macron's party, obviously it is a poison chalice and it's an incredibly tough job, but I think you're not going. You will be forgiven for failing. I think an impossible job in politics is one where you will get the blame for everything, and you're put in an impossible situation. You'll get the blame. I don't think this is quite that. I think every single person with a set of eyeballs is aware that the next prime minister will probably fail, and if they fail, it will be Emmanuel Macron's fault. So yeah, I don't know. It depends who it is. I think the rumor at the moment in Paris seems to be that Macron will finally actually appoint a prime minister from the left or the centre left. Which, because obviously the left had a really good showing at the last elections. The left bloc was the largest bloc. And a large portion of French voters, as a result, have, wondered since the elections, the snap election, why there hasn't been a left-wing government since. So, maybe that would change. So again, I think, is the left's moment. The problem is, I think, French left is not always the best at doing what's best for itself or the country or anyone. I think the amount of infighting after the snap election was incredibly unedifying. So let's see what happens next. But again, weirdly, I think this is not, it's not going to be a fun job. But again, I think you'd really have to be incredibly mean-spirited to be that. And that is the fault of the Prime Minister, that things failed, because look at the situation now.
To be clear, Yossi, President Macron is not at all obliged to call an early presidential election. He can stay in the job until April 2027. But if we assume that he can't seriously just do this once a month for the next 18 months, is he hoping that the voters will get to a point where they start blaming the politicians and not him?
It's a possibility. First, I want to say that the left is divided and polarized is not breaking news. I think this has been for 150 years one of the nature of, every small group thinks that they know better than others. That's why you have so many strands in left. And that's on a serious point why the right is better in winning election in many places, because when they need to unite, they unite. I mean, this is a possibility of keeping changing, going through the crisis, because constitutionally, Macron already said, I'm not resigning. I was elected for a full term. So at the end of the day, I try to think about it with not being an expert on French politics. If I'm a voter, I will say, get your act together. There is a country to run. You're fighting over the budget on whether another year of, whether we retired at 63 or 64. And is this a good enough reason that the world is falling apart and there is climate change and wars here and there? And that's where we are going through a political crisis instead of finding a prime minister that can unite and have majority within the assembly. So I think they need to take the blame. I can't blame the opposition that wants election. That's what opposition always want, because the assumption of Marine Le Pen, on the basis of this crisis, she's going to do better in the next election, and maybe it will lead. How many times she ran for presidency?
It felt like 74, but yeah.
Well, there are two different Le Pen since 74.
Yes. Yeah, never-ending supply.
So who knows, maybe 20 times lucky. So maybe she will.
But she can't stand, though, in this election.
She can?
Do you know?
Not for president, no.
Yes, not for president. But again, so weirdly, I think if I were Macron or someone who is not Marine Le Pen, I would not be against, actually, I think, the idea of a snap presidential election, because it's a bit like, okay, so the figurehead of the far right could not stand. They've not really had the time to present anyone, so they do have Jordan Bardella, who is the leader of the party and who's the kind of, anointed one. But he's still very young. I think he's 31, 32. So I think that would not be the worst play, I think, of going, well, let's hit while the far right tries to recover from Marine Le Pen being unable to stand. But it's still a risky gamble. And I guess the snap election had been a risky gamble and it did not pay off in any way. So maybe no one's got this massive appetite for risky gambles.
But also the experiment of having a very young president didn't pay off exactly.
A young prime minister. Well,
president.
He's quite a young president. God, it's depressing. Just finally on this one, Murray, you mentioned earlier that he may give the left wing a shot at running the National Assembly, and you are right. They're probably right to be aggrieved that they haven't been given a go, given that they did have quite a good election. But given that Marine Le Pen has threatened to bring down any government that Macron tries to commission a prime minister to put together, what if, just for fun, he said to her, all right, you do it?
I mean, I'd rather he didn't. I guess it is a possibility. But the problem is, Macron got elected two elections in a row by saying essentially it's the far right or me. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know how you could live with yourself if, having done that, and you go, well, psych, actually is the far right and me. Actually, sorry, you maybe misheard, actually, when I was talking about it, it's actually the far right and me. And there's, I think, that was the central plank, essentially, of his platform, especially in the last election, when he just was not that popular and people didn't really want to vote for him. So no, I don't, politically, he just cannot get away with it.
Well, to Russia now, which, if it has accomplished little else during its protracted Ukrainian misadventure, has at least managed to make flesh a couple of the more lurid fantasies of the West's Cold War with the Soviet Union, i.e. engineering land battles on the European continent involving troops from North Korea, and it is increasingly the case Cuba. Ukrainian officials believe that Cuban soldiers are on track to overhaul the North Korean contingent to become the largest of President Vladimir Putin's foreign legions. Russia is recruiting increasingly from overseas, and not only for reasons of personnel shortages. Dead Cubans, Koreans or cannon fodder from wherever else do not oblige pensions from the Russian state or cause much grief among ordinary Russians. Yossi, we are taking Ukrainian intelligence's words for this, and they are, of course, not in the business of making Russia look good. But they are claiming that possibly 25,000 Cubans have been recruited. That is on top of the North Koreans plus press gangies reported from Senegal, Zimbabwe and Cameroon, among other places. It doesn't really suggest that this is going well for Russia, does it?
No, and they are not necessarily soldiers. They are probably falling under the definition of mercenaries, because they are not sent as Cuban troops, but people that, because of the economic situation in Cuba, when the average salary is around $25-30 per month, they are offered like $2,000. Mm-hmm. So for them, if they survive it, it means when they go back to Cuba, they are in a much better economic situation. But it shows when, talking about 1 million Russian casualties over the war, and I know it sounds so morbid, but from Putin's point of view, if soldiers or mercenaries from other countries die, it doesn't have the same effect domestically on him. The pressure, it might create pressures in other countries. Not that North Korea really cared about it, but on Russia, on Putin, it released some of the pressure.
Murray, there was, of course, a certain amount of ideological, fellow feeling between Cuba and the Soviet Union when they were fighting on the same side in various theatres during the Cold War. Do you get the sense that there's anything left of that, or is this, weirdly now, just an entirely sort of capitalist exchange of labour for wages?
I mean, it does seem to be really, really financial from what I've seen. And, and one thing that was actually shocking is that apparently some Cuban soldiers, mercenaries, however we're calling them, have said that actually they were duped by Russia. So they were told that they were going to Russia for construction jobs and then got sent to the front line, or at least got sent to, kind of fight in the war against Ukraine. So no, I don't know, again, and I think it's probably quite tough to know what kind of information regimen people have in Cuba. But no, I do think a lot of it, as Yossi was saying, seems to be financial to me.
Is there an element here, though, as well, perhaps, Yossi, certainly where North Korea is concerned, perhaps less so of Cuba, maybe Iran as well, attempting to acquire actual battlefield experience?
I don't think this is the case with Cuba. Cuba has really no enemies. It's an island. When it was involved with wars, like in Angola, for instance, Mozambique, it's war for ideological reasons. What happened in the last few years in 2018, a terrible hurricane that hit Cuba, then came COVID. And before that, first came Trump, and Trump came again because Obama visited in 2016, and there was the rapprochement between the United States and Cuba, and the relations with the United States improved a lot, and as a result, more tourism. But if around 2018 there were 5 million tourists per year, we are talking now about 2.2 million. This hits badly. Also, the number of doctors and other medical professions that are working, which is a major income for Cuba, it went down from 50 to around 30,000. So it reflects more than anything in economics. You're not trying to get more military experience, in my mind.
Does it make the case, though, Murray, that there is this wider conflict in play, as some have posited, between, and it's a similar, I guess, Cold War dynamic, the democratic world versus the authoritarian world, that authoritarian world now being thought of as Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and apparently Cuba?
The West and the rest.
Exactly.
Yes, and I think... And I think it's not. I feel like it's not a big controversial thing to say that there's clearly been a bit of a kind of political realignment, over the past few years, kind of globally. But yes, and it seems concerning as well, because I think you also see, for example, lots of countries in Africa not necessarily going, kind of towards the West as they would have once upon a time, but either kind of going to that kind of other. I feel like polar opposite doesn't quite work. That other pull, or certainly kind of trying to keep their powder dry. So it's not, it's not entirely clear to me that this is a fight the West will win as well on the kind of longer run.
Well, to the United Kingdom now, already beset with arguments over migrants crossing the English Channel, and which may not yet have come to terms with the possibility of people seeking refuge from the other direction. One enterprising homesteader in the English region of Buckinghamshire is raffling his house, pitching it, possibly, who knows, with a view to receiving publicity from such prestigious current affairs forums as this, the Monocle Daily, as a bolt hole for Americans fleeing their country's slide into idiocracy. A mere $10 could win you a pleasant-looking 5-bedroom pile of bricks with both gardens and views. Mari, I was a bit bewildered by the copy, which is supposed to entice people to buy tickets. It says here, 6 miles from Windsor Castle, ancestral home to the kings and queens of England. I can't tell whether he's advertising proximity or sort of suggesting, look, at 6 miles, you won't see them. So that's a safe distance.
But also, I'm a bit like, how much do you really get on a week-to-week basis from being close to Windsor? Like, do you really go once a week? Like, I feel like, I live quite near, I guess I'm definitely within 6 miles of Buckingham Palace. I don't go to Buckingham Palace. No, it's not. But crucial also, I live within 6 miles of other things. So no, I really enjoyed that bit because it's a bit like, but what does that give us? It's a bit like saying, oh yes, and also there are, I don't know, like geese in the neighbourhood. It's like,
I think they're basically saying it's in the middle of bloody nowhere, I think, which may have been why he has struggled to sell it, Yossi, which I believe is what has driven him to this. But there actually is, if you read around it, in the last couple of years, there is a noticeable rise in American migration to the United Kingdom.
First of all, there is no shortage of nowhere in the United States. If you really, if you want to disappear somewhere in the United States, it's easier than in the UK. But I don't think it's new. And it's one of the things, because the conversation about migration is about not Americans, because of the racist nature in this country of migration. So they don't mention usually Americans that work in the city. So there is actually...
There's not been much complaint about Australians hosting their podcasts either, strangely enough.
That's been so long.
You keep writing in every day.
No one tells him about the complaints. But so there's something there. But actually in 2016, when Trump won the first election, many of the people from the previous or from the Obama administration found themselves in all sorts of places here in London, in other places. They went back during the Biden administration, so they look for an alternative right now. But this, I mean, what I find about this story fascinating is the idea, put your house on raffle, you make money because the way you put it, you will make money anyway. Because
this is what I wanted to say, and Mari, I will put this. This sounds like an absolutely amazing racket, because if I have understood this correctly, if 150,000 tickets or more are sold, then fine, somebody draws the prize and wins the house. If he doesn't sell 150,000 tickets, he keeps the house. The winner of the raffle will get 50% of the total ticket revenue. The platform will take 10%. He'll get 40% of the money raised and still have his house.
I mean, it sounds quite nice. But if I were him, I would stop advertising it like really, really sharpish. Like the second it gets past something, be like, oh, well, it's done. That's that. But yes, no, it's. I think it's actually quite a decent thing. I was actually, while recording this segment, I was like, can I? And there's, oh no, I'm renting. Like, I don't know, what am I thinking? I can't raffle my rent. That's not a thing I could do.
You could buy a ticket in this raffle. I mean, is this perhaps the future of the real estate market in this country? Is this how we solve it? Everybody just buys raffle tickets until you win a house, and we all somehow end up with a house which has cost us 10 quid.
I mean, I think that's a really good sitcom material. We can do that. I feel like we can put it alongside my sitcom material of also Cubans and North Koreans having to become best buds in Ukraine. I think would be quite a fun comedy of errors. I feel like, keep them coming. I think this radio show is giving us a lot here.
And there is no gazumping if you do that. No, so there is.
Just finally on this, are you tempted, Yossi? Are you in for £7.50 or whatever this is?
Well, it's not a bad idea. Now that you put it like this, maybe I should buy a ticket.
Mari, £7.50, but if you win, you have to live in rural Buckinghamshire.
But that's my thing. I think you would have to pay me 450k or however much to leave London. So it's not like, I wouldn't pay to leave London.
Mari Leconte and Yossi Meckelberg, thank you both for joining us. Finally on today's show, our weekly letter from Tbilisi.
It might not feel like it when you're stuck in a queue to drop off a parcel that could not be returned by courier, but there was, of course, a time when post offices were buildings that represented the future. It's not by chance that autocratic governments like Italy's fascist dictatorship built monumental, hulking structures to house their central postal hubs. The Sicilian capital of Palermo is a case in point. Its square structure and tall frontal columns, completed in the 1930s, make it look like a temple to the cult of technology and modern efficiency. Perhaps it's because of the fact that I grew up in Italy, surrounded by architectural mementos of a past that many wish hadn't happened but nobody can forget, that I wasn't too surprised by Tbilisi's mixed urban fabric when I got to the city. In the capital of Georgia, many reminders of a complicated political history date back to Soviet times. The city is full of brutalist buildings. Some of these imposing grey towers are clearly better kept than others. But it's perhaps again no surprise that one of the most striking, iconic examples of this architecture in town should be a former post office. Set on the thunderously busy, uber-central Rustaveli Avenue, the building was first designed and constructed in the 1970s, conceived by architects Lado Alexei Meshkishvili and Teimuraz Mikashavidze. The former was a prolific architect in Georgia's Soviet times. His other projects in the capital include the saucer-like sports palace and the squat, linear chess palace and alpine club. Like most Soviet buildings in the modernist style, the post office was a solid, square, bulky structure or perpendicular lines. The windows sat in a neat grid, and there was very little room for ornamentation, and yet there was something stately about the place, and not just because of its enormous size. Its regimented poise gave it almost a look of a museum, helped perhaps by the fact that this was no cement construction. The exterior facade was covered in Bolnisi tuff, the same stone that gives most of the historical buildings in the rest of the city, including the Georgian parliament nearby, their golden hue. Back when it was opened, this place was more than just a public office. It was a point of connection with the rest of the world, a hub where people who didn't yet have access to phones could come, make calls and send telegrams, and experience that technology for themselves. Residents gravitated here for errands and news until the building eventually lost its function and was slated for redevelopment in 2013. It took quite a long time for a new project to emerge from its disused skeleton, but if you head to Tbilisi today, you'll see the tough facade as polished and clean as it could be. As of this year, the building has begun its new life as a Telegraph Hotel, a luxury hotel managed by real estate arm of investment group Silk Road Group. World-famous Shanghai-based architectural practice Narian Hu were called in for the spruce-up. Their idea was to maintain the building's appearance as much as possible, at least on the exterior. Inside, they have brought a minimalist approach to the hotel's 239 rooms, but they were particularly keen to keep a sense of exchange that they believe was the original spirit of the place. That means floor-to-ceiling windows at ground level so that passers-by can catch a glimpse of what's going on inside and feel enticed by its restaurants, which include an accomplished spot by Parisian-based Thai-born chef Rose Chalalai Singh called Lan Thai. The team hopes that this private meets public predicament will become even truer when, as the project progresses, the square in front of the hotel will be turned into a greener, more pedestrianised space than the de facto open-air parking lot it is now. Perhaps it's no coincidence that as Georgia experiences a remarkable tourism boom, this building has once again come to represent the future. Not one of cordless communications, but of real estate investment and hospitality developments, which are popping up around Tbilisi and beyond. Who knows what its next futuristic incarnation will be. For Monocle in Tbilisi, I am Chiara Rimella.
Thank you, Chiara. That is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Mari Leconte and Yossi Meckelberg. The show was produced by Hassan Anderson and researched by Joanna Moser. Our sound engineer was Steph Chungu. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time tomorrow. Thanks for listening.